She's a radio announcer in Philadelphia who hosts a show there and somehow scored an interview with Joe Biden. Now you're like, how did that come about? So it's the only Black radio station fully owned there in Pennsylvania, in a swing state, right? Very, very important swing state that Joe Biden is campaigning in. It's called WURD Radio. And so this radio host, Andrea Lawful Sanders, got this interview with the president. Except it was kind of a train wreck. I mean, it was sort of funny because, first of all, what I'm about to tell you is great, right? Because apparently this was all like scripted out, et cetera. But even though it's scripted out, he still can't get it. You just have to hear what he said and how this went down. So Joe Biden goes on this radio show in Philadelphia and proceeds to tell everyone he's a Black woman. Let's play this. Clip number 16.
By the way, I'm proud to be, as I said, the first vice president, first Black woman, served with a Black president. I'm proud to the first Black woman in the Supreme Court. There's just so much that we can do because together there's nothing. Look, this is the United States of America.
And we Black women are all over it. Sometimes I'm like, wait a second. I feel like a comedian. I'm like, this stuff writes itself. I mean, this is not what I do, right? I'm not a comedian. I'm not that funny. I just talk about news. And yet this stuff is right here in our face. So Joe Biden saying he's a Black woman. But the best part is these questions were handed to him. His team wrote the darn questions. Now, let me just like preface this by saying this is not done. Like, it's just never done in journalism. I've worked in this industry for many, many years on national TV since the year 2000. I started writing for my local newspaper in the 5th grade. Okay, so we're going back a ways. I've been around this my entire life. Nobody accepts questions, okay, from anyone. You might, in fairness, say, okay, President Biden, you're coming on the show. So you may say to the team, you know what, we're going to talk about the debate. We're going to talk about inflation. I want to talk about the border. You'll give like big picture ideas. But it is not acceptable ever for them to say, no, we're not going to talk about inflation. To which you would then say, well, you know what, if it comes up, it comes up. Like, you agreed to the interview. You can't then say, okay, we're not going to talk about inflation. We're not going to talk about this. We're going to talk about that. That's not what happens. Like, they agree to do the interview and it's game on. And you certainly don't take questions. Now, PR people in the business world will try and do that kind of thing. You say, no thanks. I got my own questions. You know, I as a journalist ought to be able to come up with questions, right? But apparently not Andrea Lawful Sanders, who's such an unfortunate person that not only can she not come up with her questions, but then she admits it. Like, I can't make this stuff up. On CNN, the train wreck happening in real time. It's like, who's worse, Biden or Andrea, the radio host? Let's take a listen. Here she is telling CNN that the White House gave her the questions.
You each you asked 4 questions, and maybe that's what you were allowed to ask by the campaign or the White House. But they were essentially the same questions, both interviews, about accomplishments, progress in your respective state, what's at stake in the election, what he has to say about his debate performance, and what he would say to voters who think their vote doesn't matter or might sit this election out. Were those questions given to you by the White House, or did you have, or the campaign, or did you have to submit questions ahead of this interview?
The questions were sent to me for approval. I approved of them.
Okay, so the White House sent the questions to you ahead of the interview?
Yes.
Okay.
I got several questions, 8 of them, and the 4 that were chosen were the ones that I approved.
Okay. And the reason I ask is not a criticism of either of you. It's just that if the White House is trying now to prove the vim, vigor, acuity of the president, I don't know how they do that by sending questions first before the interview so that the president knows what's coming.
He's like trying to pretend it's totally normal, right? He's like, oh, I got a story here. This lady is such a dumb, I won't say it. That she's like, admitting that she doesn't even come up with her own questions, and then just told us all on live TV. I mean, this is unbelievable. So the radio station issued a statement thereafter announcing that Andrea Lawful Sanders would no longer be working for them, that they had agreed to part effective immediately. Oh, you're just damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Because this is one where clearly no self-respecting journalist would ever accept questions from the White House. Yet simultaneously, she's a little bit of a victim here, right? Because now you just fired the poor lady for actually telling the truth. At least we know that. Hey, at least we know what the White House is up to. At least we know what they're doing. You know, they sat there and cheap fake every time that we showed his cognitive decline. We were somehow, meaning, you know, me right over here on this streaming channel, I was somehow not telling the truth by showing you those things. And yet they're out there trying to script questions in the only Black-owned media outlet in all of Philadelphia. I mean, it's like unbelievable. And then this poor lady gets fired because she tells the truth when the CNN anchor asks her, gee, did they send you questions? Yeah, they sent me 8 and I chose 4. They write that she agreed to do the interview without the radio channel's knowledge, consultation, or collaboration. So management, you're off the hook. They had nothing to do with it. The interview featured predetermined questions provided by the White House, which violates our practice of remaining an independent media outlet accountable to our listeners. You think? As a result, Ms. Lawful Sanders and WURD Radio have mutually agreed to part ways effective immediately. So the lady got fired because she did something clearly she should not have done. They go on to tout how wonderful it is that they are the independent Black-owned talk radio channel. This is really messy. This is really, really messy because you see, again, some people are not bright enough. Some podcasters out there or radio show hosts in Philadelphia think that is just fine. Like you let the White House script the questions. That's how it goes, right? They don't think she's smart enough to script her own questions. You see how many different ways this thing can go. This is just really, really bad for the Biden White House because who would do what they wanted until, of course, she was too stupid to see it through to the final. I mean, I'm sorry, but this is one messy situation. You got people out there that aren't smart enough to come up with their own questions, so they are gullible to a White House that is trying to script the entire narrative. At least Maureen Dowd, with her column, calls them out, and boy, does she call them out. This duck. That is such a jerk to say all that he said, going after Maureen for daring to question the grammar of the President of the United States. Yeah, I mean, listen, we're questioning more than grammar at this point, ladies and gentlemen, a whole lot more than grammar.